This meeting is being recorded.
That's new.
Well, good evening. I'd like to call this regular Board of Finance meeting for Monday, March 21st, 2022 to order. First item on the agenda this evening is to receive the audit report for fiscal year 2020-2021. It says here prepared by Bloom Shapiro. That was the previous.
That's changed.
But we need to read it as it says on the agenda. We'll say CLA. And present this evening, or to present the audit is, and it's great to have the names on the screen, Vanessa Rosito and Santo Carta, who have reported to us and presented in the past. So with that, we have a few documents, and I believe, is it Santo or Vanessa, you're going to share your screen so that we can
see. I'm going to share my screen.
Coming up. And I will let you take it from here for agenda item number 1.
Okay, great.
So Vanessa, can you see the screen?
I can see it. Yep.
Okay.
Definitely.
Everybody else can see it, I assume.
Yes, we do. Thank you.
So great. So thank you everyone for having us tonight. Santo and I are going to go through the PowerPoint presentation. I know Mary Jane said she also sent out all of the deliverables. So if there are any questions on the deliverables specifically, we can go over those afterwards, and any other questions that you have.
Okay.
So as far as the agenda tonight, we're going to talk about the terms of the engagement. We'll go over some high-level financial highlights, talk about the federal and state single audit, also the internal control over financial reporting, otherwise known as the Yellow Book letter. I will summarize the governance communication, and then lastly, just go over the laundry list of upcoming GASB pronouncements. So as far as the terms of the engagement, we were engaged to express opinions on whether the basic financial statements are presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. We express an in relation to opinion on the schedule of expenditures of federal awards and the schedule of expenditures of state financial assistance in your federal and state single audits. We express an opinion on the compliance related to the programs that we test in the federal and state single audit. And we also provide a report on internal control over financial reporting and compliance with laws, regulations, contracts, and grants, and also on internal control over compliance related to those major programs that we test in the federal and state single audit. So just to summarize the results, we have issued a clean opinion, technically called an unmodified opinion on the financial statements. It's the best opinion that you can receive. It means that everything is correctly stated in accordance with our accounting standards. We do have an emphasis of matter paragraph in the opinion because we did have to implement GASB Statement 84 this year, which is the new definition of fiduciary activities. So we will go over that later in the presentation. And the Yellow Book letter had no findings on internal control over financial reporting. So a clean report over internal control. And then just to summarize the federal single audit, a clean opinion over the major federal programs that we tested and no compliance findings or significant deficiencies in internal control. And exact same results for the state single audit, unmodified opinion over the major state programs that we tested and no compliance findings on any of the programs. So clean audit, federal single audit, and state single audit. I will turn it over to Santo to go into the high-level view of some of the amounts and just some highlights we thought you would be interested in.
Hi, everyone. So we'll start off with the government-wide financial statements. For governmental activities, current assets went from 34.4 million to 40 million. This is mainly because of the ARPA funding that was received and unspent. Your capital, capital assets went from 186.9 million to 188.5 million. Your deferred outflows went from 14.2 million to 11.2 million. Current liabilities went from 19 million to 24 million. This is also probably because of, or is because of ARPA. There's $3.3 million increase from ARPA funding in there. Long-term liabilities went from 168.6 million to 139.1. This is mainly due to paying down debt, and your pension and OPEB liabilities decreased by about 23 million in the current year. And we'll talk about that later. And your net position went from 41.7 to 48.2 million, an increase of about 6.5 million. And for business type activities, which is your waste transfer station and marina fund, had a decrease of about 17,000, 1.6 to 1.585 million. And feel free to ask any questions. I do have the financial statements open on the side here also, if someone has any questions for me.
May I? I don't think it's a bad time. So we mentioned the drop in the OPEB and pension liabilities. Is the offset to this the deferred inflows of resources?
Yeah, so the decrease is 23 million. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped that section, didn't I? Yeah, your deferred inflows went from 6 million to 28 million. Yeah, so you don't get the whole benefit in the first year. They do like a 5-year smooth on that, and that's why you don't notice the whole benefit. That's why your net position isn't increased by 23 million, let's say.
Yep.
Any other questions?
Okay, thanks. I just wanted that confirmed.
All right, and next are your fund financial statements. General fund net position, fund balance increased by 2.1 million to 21.1 million. This is mainly because of your premium was recognized in that fund for the bonds that were issued, and your excess revenues and your expenditures under budget gave you an increase of about 2.1 million. Bonded projects fund decreased by about 1.3 million, giving you a negative fund balance of 2.4 million. Your high school construction fund decreased by 91,000 to 3.0 million. Your community activities fund increased by 97,000 to a negative 2.5 fund balance. This fund is mainly due to your drinking bond funds and loans that are going to be received, I think, in the current year. So that negative fund balance will go away in the current year.
Yeah, Santo, I'd just like to add, just for clarification, that that's the Mulberry Point project.
Okay. And then miscellaneous special grants fund increased by 7,000 to 62,000. And the remaining non-major governmental funds decreased by 395,000 to 2.4 million. Any questions?
Can I add another comment?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just for the board's information, the reason the bonded projects and the school construction have negative balances is because we reimburse ourselves with bonding. We don't bring the bonding in before it's spent. So that money will be covered by bonding the first, when we do it in August. So I just wanted to explain that.
Okay. So some financial highlights for the general fund. Total fund balance ended at 21.13 million. Your non-spendable fund balance was 22,000. Restricted fund balance was 397,000, which is your volunteer firefighter fund. Committed fund balance is 6.41 million, and your assigned fund balance is 2.51 million, which is made up of your continued in force, encumbrances, and reserve for personnel. And your unassigned ended at 11.8 million for the year. So as Vanessa mentioned earlier, GASB 84 was implemented in the current year. And this just, we just reclassified, as you can tell in the middle here, the volunteer firefighter fund was moved from a special revenue fund into the general fund and is now restricted fund balance. And we moved the student activity fund from an agency fund to a special revenue fund. So that's pretty much the gist of the GASB 84 that was implemented in the current year. Any questions on that?
Continue.
Some additional financial highlights. Property tax collections stayed at 99.5%, pretty much stayed the same as last year. General fund budget for revenues, you were 327,000 greater than budget, and your expenditures were 894,000 below budget. Your net pension liability decreased by 12.2 million to 9.04 million, and your total OPEB liability decreased by 10.6 million to 25.42 million. So a total decrease of 22.8 million between those two. Any questions on those? Okay. Next is the federal single audit. Total federal awards, 3.92 million. We tested the ESSER and the Coronavirus Relief Fund grants, issued unmodified opinion on major program compliance, and there were no compliance findings. Same thing for state single audit. Total state awards, 6.45 million. We tested the drinking water program loan grant and the bond drinking water grant. Again, issued an unmodified opinion on major program compliance, and there were no compliance findings. Any questions? Okay, I'm going to pass it back to Vanessa to finish it off.
Thanks, Santo. So I'm just going to give you a summary of the required auditor's communication that was sent out. So this is a communication between CLA and those charged with governance, which is the Board of Finance. We report to the Board of Finance. So we're required to communicate some items. So we've just highlighted on these two slides some of those items. So as we mentioned previously, a couple of times, we implemented GASB 84 this year. We're also required to talk about the significant estimates in your financial statements. Significant estimates could be susceptible to management override, meaning that management could manipulate these amounts to get a required outcome. So we have to spend a little bit more time when we're auditing these amounts. So they're listed here. So the useful lives of capital assets are used to calculate accumulated depreciation. Your allowance for uncollectible receivables is an estimate made by management based upon historical information on the collectability of your receivables. Your net pension and net OPEB liability, you utilize an actuary to calculate these for you based upon assumptions that are agreed upon by management. And then lastly, the medical claims liability, which is also based upon the knowledge, if you will, of a third party. So we looked at these amounts to make sure that they are reasonable when considered in the financial statements. And then on this slide, we did not have any disagreements with management. Management did not consult with other accountants. We did not encounter any difficulties in performing the audit with management. Everybody was very responsive. There was one uncorrected misstatement, and I'll explain this. So the way that the bond premium is amortized has been done on a straight line method in previous years, just like pretty much everybody else in the state of Connecticut. And CLA is very particular with the, this is one of the items that they're very particular with. It is supposed to be amortized on the effective interest method. So when we compared the effective interest method to the way that it was being amortized, which is on the straight line basis, there was a more than insignificant difference, but an immaterial difference. So it wasn't large enough to restate the financial statements, but it was large enough that we had to put it in this letter to let you know about it. I will tell you that we have had this in every single Bloom Shapiro to CLA client, so you are in good company. So we will be utilizing the effective interest method going forward, so we won't have to worry about this anymore. And lastly, we are independent of the town of Guilford. And then GASB standards. So there's two slides here. There's a list of new standards for the next fiscal year 2022, and then on the next slide 2023. So I'm only going to talk about two standards, and I know we've talked about these before, but they're still here. Unfortunately, they haven't been delayed. So for June 30th, 2022, the big standard is GASB 87, which is the lease standard. So this is all of the operating leases of the town and the Board of Ed, and every department. We have to look at these leases. Management has to inventory these leases to see if they need to be capitalized. So this is anything that the town is paying rent for or actually receiving rent from. So any rental income or rental expense, we have to analyze to see if they meet the criteria of this standard. And the change is rather than a revenue or an expense, there's going to be an asset and a liability recorded on the financial statement. And then in 2023, again, there's really just one big standard that you're going to have to worry about, and it's very similar to the lease standard. It's Statement 96, which is the subscription-based IT arrangement. So any software subscription arrangements that you have, it's exactly the same type of thing as the leases. They're going to have to be brought onto your balance sheet as an asset and a liability. So as soon as the dust settles with the 2021 season, we will be reaching out to Mary Jane and Linda to see how many operating leases there are, and see what the effect of this standard will be on your financial statements. One way that we are advising our clients to look for arrangements like this, in addition to just knowing that you have these leasing arrangements, is asking your AP person to look for, similar monthly payments. So that's one way to make sure that the population is complete when implementing this standard. And that is all we have. So we'll turn it over to everyone for questions.
Vanessa and Santos, thank you very much. So do we have any questions from the board? As usual, very, very good, thorough presentation. Our first selectman.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I think Santo referred to the pass-throughs for coronavirus relief. I can't recall a specific date, but looking at the federal single audit, we did not receive the American Rescue Plan funds until after June 30th. Is that correct?
We got half.
You received you received the ARPA funding before year end, but you didn't spend any of
Okay.
it.
3.2.
So it's an unearned revenue on your financial.
It's on the revenue side, but it is not is that part of the federal single audit?
Oh, no. ESSER and the CRF are not the same thing as ARPA.
That's what I was looking for, the distinction between the two. Okay.
So Matt, because you didn't
As
have any
ARPA
ARPA expenditures, it's not on the federal single audit. So you're not going to see it on the federal single audit until you identify expenditures.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Yep.
Okay.
This is inconsequential, but I'm just curious. Does every town in the country receive money because Hawaii doesn't administer its own community development block grants? This is crazy.
Where's that book?
It's page 5 of the federal.
I'm not sure why they call it.
I looked it up. Every state looks after its own, administers its own community development block grant, except Hawaii. So they get theirs distributed among all the rest of the states.
Huh.
Interesting.
Aloha.
We were warned. We were warned.
We were warned. That's
Yeah,
right.
right. We were warned.
Love it.
Love it.
Anything else for Vanessa or Sandra?
Just one quick question.
Jeff.
So for the leased equipment, I know we lease copiers and things like that. Would that also include things on the education side, like the Chromebooks and things like that, that the Board of Education leases for the students? There's a capital lease that is a line item in the Board of Education budget each year.
So if it's already recorded as a capital lease, it's already recorded correctly. We're looking for things that are just expenses every month. So if there's any arrangements that are just an operating lease, that has to be treated as a capital lease.
Okay.
One other on the IT side, you talked about the long-term, or not long-term, but multi-year licensing agreements with, say, Microsoft. If we buy a 3-year license as opposed to a 1-year license for our employees, that is what Statement 96 is supposed to address?
So these are software arrangements. So those would be licenses, Matt. I don't think those are included. These are just for the software.
Just for the software itself? They usually get you both sides. The software, right? The software and the number of seats or licenses that you take. And typically, Microsoft gives you a discount of nominal percentage if you do a 3-year. So that would be part of this then?
Yeah, we'd have to, I mean, what I would say is that we have to look at everything. So I would advise you all to just inventory everything and we'll take a look at it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, anything further? All right. Vanessa, Santo, thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you both.
Nice to
I'll
see you
stop
too.
here now.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your evening. And as everybody comes up now on the screen, I can see. Oh, okay. I see that our chairwoman is on from the Board of Education, so you still have plenty of time, Katie, so. Item number 2,
Bless you.
public forum. Anybody wishing to address the Board of Finance in public forum? Seeing none. Item number 3, approve minutes of our regular minutes of February 17th, 2022. I know I had a couple things on each one, or maybe a little thing on each one, but anybody have, let me hear a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes.
Some out.
Second.
Okay. Corrections,
I have
comments?
some.
Veronica, all yours, go ahead.
On page 2, second to the last paragraph, there's an unfinished sentence. Mr. Ailes noted that under purchased services, comma, professional technical services is at 925, comma.
Yeah, I actually circled that. That should be 92%. Should be at 92%.
And then the next paragraph, I think it's just missing a Y for they, is just a timing on when they fill the meters. I think that's all I have on these.
Anybody else? That was all I had.
I had one on page 4.
Go ahead.
The first paragraph in section 6, the last sentence, they did learn that the grand list could help the increases in the budget. I think, without putting words in Dr. Balestrese's mouth, I think it was that the increase in the grand list could help offset the increases in the
Yeah,
budgets.
that's good. Yeah. Good catch.
And then on the next page, first paragraph at the top of page 5, in the middle of that paragraph, there's discussion about Anthem. It says historical experiences pushing the increase as well as Anthem's change in how they are costing the stop loss. I think it might be charging for the stop loss. I could be wrong about that. And then similar to the one Veronica pointed out, after that period, it should be the medical increase rather than they medical increase in that same line. And then lastly, on page 7, the last paragraph, the second line, the sentence that begins, Mr. Hoy noted that they traditionally, and then I said, I think that those two words, they and traditionally, should be removed because it should read, Mr. Hoy noted that the town traditionally does a 2-year bond cycle.
I could have been stumbling over some words, but thank you for thank you for clarifying.
I want to make sure you look.
That's a full-time job.
That's all I had.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. All right, I'll call a question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? Okay. Minutes, public hearing minutes of March 8th. All right, on page 8.
You want a motion
Um,
first?
Oh, yes, I do. Thank you, Veronica. I appreciate it. Do you have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, now we'll go into it. So I don't, page 8 at the last paragraph, the large paragraph there, where it does start with Mr. Ailes provided a recap of the budget. As you go down, it's probably about 2/3 of the way down the sentence, it says they would need to come up with 102,944,037, or a 4.01% increase over last year. I didn't write what it should be, but I believe that 4.01, if I remember correctly, was what the mill rate increase would be had there not been grand list growth. I remember that 4.01 number. So I would rephrase that, say they would need to come up with 102 million, that number, in property tax revenue, which would equal a 4.01% increase had the grand list not increased. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Something along those
It does.
lines. I just know that was the number if the grand list didn't go up. That was my only correction on those minutes. Anybody else?
On page 2, I believe the same paragraph that we just went over in the February minutes is in there that needs the same change about the costing the stop loss and the they medical increase instead of the second paragraph.
Oh, yeah.
Thought I had no minutes.
Same paragraph, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs down that begins, he then went over investments, ins this budget, it's just a typo.
While we're in that paragraph.
Sure.
A little further down, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the fifth line, the one that starts need or by a legitimate, honest, sincere, repeated request received by the community. I think it should be received from the community.
Where are you, Jeff?
Fifth line down of that paragraph, the one that started with, he went over investments that we just made that
Oh,
change to
okay.
ins. The line that starts need or by a legitimate, honest, sincere, repeated request received, I think should be from the community rather than by
Yeah.
the community. Then I have one on the bottom of page 3, the second to last paragraph, the paragraph that starts Ms. Demusis, and the second line that starts GHS has always had one principal, one assistant principal, it should be PAL.
Any others? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstention. Okay. Finally, the approval of minutes of budget workshop minutes of March 10th, 2022. Do I hear a motion?
Move to approve.
Second,
Comments, corrections?
Well, I have one all the way on 9. When starts Mr. Hartman. I'm sure I was mumbling.
This is page 9.
It's on page 9.
Okay.
I said I was in favor of the project and bonding is advantageous because rates are low, but in order to tie things together, what I also said was, looking forward, there's nothing to do with the past. But looking forward, we have to keep in mind that Guilford residents are the most indebted on a per capita basis among our peers. And then we may need to change bonding plans based on anticipated higher rates.
Okay, I had on page 2 up at the top, first paragraph. Last sentence, just should be a past tense, I think, just to be clear. Should be it represented, because this was the 2.23% increase before there was the Board of Assessment Appeals reduction. So it's just a past tense. And on page 6, I believe that's a typo too, on the 4th paragraph, starting with Dr. Freeman, it's the second sentence. They do not have the, let me just see. Oh, I'm sorry, it's right there in the first paragraph. Dr. Freeman said, this is a graduation requirement for students. That was it. Anybody else?
A little further up on page 6, the first paragraph, the second line, in the past, they had trouble finding world language and science teachers has been an issue. And then up on page 3, the 4th paragraph from the bottom, the one that starts Mr. Goldblatt said that Mr. Spurgeon did go back to Anthem. It says, now, I think the last word of the second line should be, now they don't have to worry about a $600,000 exposure on the medical fund.
You might have shouted.
He was emphatic about it. I remember
Yes.
that.
Great. Anything else? Okay, call the question. All in favor?
aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Item number 4. Correspondence. Standing Building Committee. I had one thing, and I think it's just worth bringing it up. I was very pleased to see. I mean, there's a lot in here. There's a lot of projects obviously going on, but I can't help but look at the, the old business item about the storage building and the fact that there's a task force that's going to be created and just seeing, stakeholders to come to a consensus and a temporary pause on the project to get everybody on board. I'm just paraphrasing. I thought that was worth at least capturing and mentioning to the public that that is moving forward in that general direction. So
Yes,
thank you.
sir.
Thank you for that. Other than that, a lot of details on the projects. Does anybody have anything specifically regarding the building committee, standing building committee?
Can we call the former member, Mr. Gamerman? He might have some questions, as he usually did.
Always did, didn't he?
Yes.
He always did.
I know Mr. DeMayo's not here, so it's not gonna get asked.
No,
but there
I
were-
am.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see.
Hey, Dave.
I didn't see
I'm,
you.
David, I'm sorry. I didn't see you either. That's what happened when I take my glasses off. Thank you for joining, Chairman.
Kickoff, very riveting discussion. If I could ask,
Make it for this live.
Pin his ears back now.
So in the March 8th meeting, there was a discussion about, I guess, a discussion between Save More and Johnson Controls and Silver Petroselli. Has there been any resolution as to what's going on with that dispute as to where there might be an adjustment or?
we're grinding them for a report in April. This is a tenuous situation for sure.
Right.
Appears to be some design issues, which forced us to go and get third-party review of the problem. It's right now the town, it's costing the town a lot of money, which we keep pressing Cliff for an answer as to whether this is a reimbursable expense, which we assume it will be because it appears to be a design error. So it's a touchy subject. We haven't. They keep testing. They keep gathering more information. But in April, we hope to have a full report so that we can bring this to some resolution and then see where it goes from there in terms of engaging town council.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. I did want to comment about the storage building.
Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, we just made it very clear that the standing building committee does not take a position on whether it's a good idea or not a good idea, or where it goes and where it doesn't go. We're strictly there as a guide for the constructability of the project and to make sure that part of the project stays on task. But the assistant chief Mike Shove felt it was important for him to address our board, so it was basically a monologue, and we captured his comments there. So,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please.
Dave, thank you very much for those comments, and I appreciate your playing Switzerland here. But at some point, as we move through the process of trying to identify whether or not the preliminary information we have relative to what can fit on that property, if you guys can provide some assistance in that assessment, that would be very helpful to the group we're going to put together.
oh, we actually will look at it totally from a constructability and operational perspective.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else for standing building? David? Thank
Yes,
you for
sir.
joining us. Thank you for joining.
My
Have a
pleasure.
good evening.
Thanks
All
very
right,
much.
guys. Thank you all. Take care.
See you
Good
next
night,
month.
Dave.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Pension committee minutes and monthly report. pension. While we're at it, we could just go to OPEB. If they're just put them together. Anything on either pension or the OPEB minutes or report.
May I suggest, just like my own portfolio, don't look at the details?
Yeah,
It's just a snapshot.
I glanced at him and I said, I heard it in the back of my mind. It's just a snapshot.
Can't time the market.
Next month will be completely different.
Keep moving.
All right, is there anything on either one of those?
No, in case anybody's wondering, it was reported that of the international holdings, something like less than 3% of our international holdings were Russian-based. And in order to unwind them, it would be more deleterious to us than any statement we'd be willing to make. And wouldn't necessarily do the town of Guilford anything
Good. Right.
Not good.
Right.
This state, there are other things we can do. It's just one of the things that came up.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you. All right. If nothing further, then we'll move on to agenda item number 5, review and accept the report of expenditures for the Board of Education for February 2020. Linda Trudeau.
Hi, and
Chairwoman Kitty Bells Tracy.
yes, hello, how are you tonight? Sorry, I
Very
couldn't
well.
be there in person. I am the reviewer from the Board of Ed for February 2020 financial reports for the fiscal year 21-22. So I will briefly touch upon the data from those reports, and then Linda and I are certainly more than willing, as you know, to answer any of your questions. So expenditures for the month of February were $4,984,940.93. Expenditures and encumbrances through the end of February were 62.62% of the budget, as compared to 63.29% in 2020-21 and 61.55% in 2019-20. As you know, we're doing a 2-year look back this year because last year was so unusual. Revenue for February was $758,711, which included $745,335 for the excess cost grant and $13,376 for pre-K tuition. So this is the first of the 2 payments we will get for the excess cost grant. It represents almost 82%. I think you know that we frequently in the second payment get a lower proportion. So we do not necessarily expect that the second payment in May will be that high. Clearly, we always hope for 100%. But I think 82, given what we've seen in the last several years, is actually reasonably high. So we're pleased with that. You can see the various categories of expenditures below. I'll just note a couple. Purchase services is the percent of the budget expended is higher than the prior year. However, we are expecting that to go down at least for a couple of reasons. One, under dues and fees, we have fees related to the International Baccalaureate program that will be paid back. And under professional and technical services, we have grant funding that is going to cover the expenditure of some hiring videos that were produced for us. And that money has not yet been reflected in the budget. Tuition continues to be lower than expended, lower than the prior year. We are obviously, as we do every year, looking at that very closely, but that is certainly good news. It's always good news, and certainly good news this far into the academic year. The Board of Education went over this financial report and the warrants extensively in our operations committee meeting, and then voted on them in our board meeting. But certainly we are ready to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay. Board questions, comments?
I had a question. And the tutors line item seems significantly lower this year. Is there a reason for that? 40% is compared to, wait a minute, I gotta look. 40% this year, 54% last year, and 57% the prior year.
There has been a reduction in some of the costs for tutors, but some of the tutors and the services are being paid out of ESSER grants or COVID relief grants.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Substitute teachers seem to be running a little higher. Have you noticed, is it people taking elective surgery that they postponed or things like that that we've heard about following the pandemic, or just any trends that you've noticed?
We've used a lot of substitutes to cover classrooms when teachers have been out either to their own COVID exposure or family measures. So we've used a lot more substitutes in this year than we have in a while.
Interesting.
Scan through all my notes, see if there's anything. Anything in particular on the tuition? I mean, right now, Board of Education on tuition is trending okay, trending under budget.
Yeah, right now we're trending on, sorry, we're trending under. And it looks like it's going to stay that way. There is the potential for a couple changes, but right now nothing's definite, so I don't know cost potentials for those. Katie, if you want to add something else.
Nope. You got it. Thank you.
I had a question on a warrant.
Go ahead. Yeah, that's fine.
Can you speak to the $14,842 expense for the teacher recruitment video? Are we being proactive about hiring and keeping our teachers, or what is that about?
Right. So that is, first of all, going to be reimbursed by a grant. So these videos were created with grant funding. And it is, in fact, a concerted effort to increase visibility about our school district and kind of broaden the approach to identifying and hiring new staff.
Just out of curiosity, where does that get posted, on the website or farther and wider?
It is, I'll let Linda jump in if there are additional things. I mean, so when any of our staff, human services kind of staff are going out to career fairs or going out to all of those types of events, there are things that can be brought with. There's certainly things that I think they're presently, Linda, posted on our website. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
So it's a tool on a website, but also one that can be used as we are out and about, trying to again broaden the search for possible staff.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I believe there's also mention of when we do a job posting, putting a link to these videos right into the job posting so that anyone who is considering applying could look at the videos before they to help them make their decision to go ahead and fill out the application.
And, there are videos about Guilford Public Schools. There's a video that speaks more specifically about Guilford, including what Guilford has to offer, its proximity to Boston and New York, et cetera. So there are a couple of different videos really trying to bring attention to a number of the assets we have in our community, as well as the assets that Guilford Public Schools could offer potential employees.
I was just scanning the numbers again, and the electricity sort of jumped out at me. It looks like we're doing really well with electricity, and I was just curious if we know why.
Might be the energy performance program.
Looked like 86% expended last year compared to 37 this year.
Oh,
No,
no, say
37 was last year.
37
Go
was
one
last
more
year.
over. 37 was last year, yeah.
84 this
I
year.
mean, that was looking for
It's an extra year.
Remember that
Oh, I
we,
see. Sorry,
yeah,
you
remember
did
these
well last
reports are
year.
giving us a 2-year
I'm
look
looking in
back.
the wrong column.
Yeah,
Right.
it's a little confusing if
Yeah.
you're used to our usual reports, but again, we asked Mrs. Trudeau to help us out with a 2-year look back. So it's
Okay,
actually the
but
third column from
We're
right.
sort of in line for kind of what you'd expect for
Right,
this year.
exactly
Okay,
right.
Yes.
sorry about that.
While we're on that page, I was just noticing, make sure I'm looking at the right column too. Dues and fees and the safety, sanitation and upkeep have both run over. And I know, there's always the encumbrances, not so much on dues and fees. Is there going to be reimbursements or credits to those, funding of some sort on the dues and fees? And did I miss that, or
Yeah, so the
those
dues and,
parts?
right, the dues and fees, one of the things I noted,
Fine.
is
Sorry.
again, International Baccalaureate.
That's it. Okay, sorry, I missed that.
That's
Yep.
okay, that's okay. Linda, safety, sanitation, and upkeep, I'm less familiar with what that might be.
So that encumbrance number will go down. As we've talked about before, facilities encumbers blanket purchase orders at the start of the year for all different possibilities. And as we get closer to the year, we start closing them out, the things that we're not going to use. So I actually had talked to Mr. Gurnham recently about going through those. So they're going to start cleaning up those and reducing that. I can't guarantee that that line's going to come in within budget, but it's not going to be that far over.
Yeah, that seems like a larger number than we're used to seeing. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but almost $500,000 on that. And I do know it'll come down. I know things get canceled as the year continues, but that seemed a little bit more than usual. But safety, sanitation, upkeep net right now, it should be surprised, I guess.
At the risk of looking at the right column, I guess I'll ask about the fuel for the buses, but it looked like we were doing good there too.
Bus works last year.
Maybe fuel.
Timing.
Well, I guess we're on fuel from a
That's usually
contract from last year, right?
Yeah, so some of that is timing of when they make their deliveries. There was also some fuel that has gotten recorded in March. It was billing for just, and it's not a huge number, for the unleaded gas that the buses use for the smaller, or the bus company uses for the smaller vehicles that they get through Public Works. So that was paid in March, so it will go up a little bit, but it's mostly just timing of when they do their deliveries.
Okay. Yeah, when I was a kid, we had to push the bus uphill in the snow.
Uphill. Both ways.
Yeah.
Little
Mr.
foot power
Chairman?
there on those buses.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, go ahead.
It's been a while since I paid close attention to these reports, as you might expect, but I think I heard and then saw revenue for February. This is on the verbiage on the financial report, which included $745,335 for the excess cost grant. And then if you go down to tuition, 4 paragraphs down a little bit later, the first payment of the excess cost grant at 558,621 for tuition has been received. So what's the difference between the 745 and the 558?
Go down a little bit further and the rest of the funds are recorded under the transportation for the special ed transportation. We split
Okay.
it between the two accounts.
Okay, so 204. That's close to the number. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have one last question is, I think it's probably embedded in the minutes. I didn't get through all of them. I tried to, but about the lunch, lunch services, how is that trending right now in terms of the overall program?
The overall program is doing really, really well. Meal counts have gone up considerably. But we do note that we learned last week that the free lunch program that has come to us in response to the pandemic will be ending this year. And our dining services director does suspect that some proportion of that increase that we've been seeing is due to the availability of that free lunch. So we may see an impact of the lack of that free lunch on those numbers come September.
Okay.
We are also expecting, and I'm going to take this opportunity, and I think we're going to try to take as many opportunities as we can over the next several months to remind any viewers that because of that, folks in our community who may be eligible for free or reduced lunch really, really, really need to make sure they get their application in for that. Because that's going to now be required in a way that it hasn't necessarily been required over the last period of time, so that those folks get the services they are eligible for regarding lunch in the fall.
Okay. Thank you for the update and the public service announcement. Else for the Board of Education? Okay. If not, I will entertain a motion to accept the report of expenditures for the Board of Education for February 2022 in the amount of $4,984,940.93.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Recusals? Okay. Dr. Bell Stracy, Linda Trudeau, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On to item number 6, review and approve report of expenditures for town government for February 2022. Ms. Malvese.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm going to start with revenues, and we are also showing a 2-year look back the same way the Board of Ed is doing. So you'll see that reflected in our reports as well. You'll see that through the end of February, we are at 98.3% compared to 94.2 last year, mainly due to the deferred tax allowance, and 98% the year before, which is more reflective of where we are today. Just a couple things I'll note. Under the selectmen's revenue, we did sell one of our used fire trucks, which brought in $6,500, which we typically don't account for in our budget because we do not have a
Beautiful.
forecast for that.
Sorry, Mr. Hartman's lamenting that he wasn't the
I
successful
would have paid
bidder for the
6,600.
fire truck.
We will be sure that you receive all of the bids available for all of our used trucks from now on.
I think it would be kind of nice to have a fire truck just nearby, just in case.
Just in case.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's got grandkids. That would be a great
lower
toy
your
to play.
insurance on your house for your homeowners.
I'm very happy that I can bring some levity I'm happy to bring levity to your meetings anytime I come. All right.
No.
The second item I'll just note is under tax collection. Typically we're about 100% this year. The end of February, we're showing about 340,000 left to come in. But I can tell you in the first 7 days of March already, we are down to only $42,000 worth of remaining revenue. So we are on target to reach that 100% goal. Even though it doesn't looks like we're a little bit lower than a normal year of 100% by now. Lastly, other departmental is our state revenue. We already are showing that we've received more funds than budgeted, and we yet to have received the pilot and the MRSA grants that are new this year, that during the budget prep we talked about. We were budgeting for next year, which showed an increase in budgeting. Other than that, I will take questions on revenue.
So I'm kind of curious about the finance line. That line, if I remember right, you deposit the taxes as we receive them and keep them in some kind of deposit instrument until we need the tax revenue and spend it out. And is that correct? I'm trying to remember where that revenue comes from.
Well, it's all of our revenue. All revenue from all funds are included in our investments. We do have a requirement to keep minimum amount in Webster Bank in order to be free of fees and to have them provide us with services over and above what you would do at your normal household. So we have money there. And also in Webster, we have a money market account, which is our most liquid money, which does garnish us some interest, obviously a very low interest rate at this point. The tax payments go directly into the short-term investment fund administered by the state. And we do put as much money into that as we can on a regular basis, because that typically has the highest interest rate. And a member of my staff monitors that regularly. And then we have a third instrument, which is a consortium, so to speak, where we have given them, it's been on a trial basis. Of course, a trial basis during COVID is not a good time to run a trial, but I did without realizing COVID was going to come. We have money in a consortium that divvies all of the funds out to banks at increments of $250,000, which is the FDIC insured amount. And so that money gets moved around between our money and money from all over whoever uses that particular consortium. So those are the three main instruments that we use for interest for this line item. We do try to keep every dollar in there that we can earning money. We are doing as well as other towns are doing. When I go to Government Finance Officers Association meetings, the joke always is none of us want to talk about interest, but it's our job to talk about interest. So that's what we do with that line item.
Okay, I mean, we've seen that, revenue much higher when we had a different interest rate environment. Do we expect that to return, or?
I will hope that it'll return.
Fed's going that way.
Yeah. All indications show us that it will take a considerable amount of time to bring us back up to the $500,000 to $600,000 that we were showing just 4 years ago.
Is our average balance, I don't know, theoretically $50 million or so?
No.
No, you have to keep, especially, so keep in mind, it's all our funds. So when Vanessa and Santos were here and they talked about negative fund balances, we pay out all of our bonded capital expense as it occurs, and we do not reimburse ourselves until the following year. So we are always behind, we're using that money, and there's many good reasons to do it that way, and I would want to change that practice. So not only are we using the funds on a regular month-to-month basis between the town and the Board of Education, keep in mind the money we have is both. Board of Ed does have a balance in their account, but they are only given what they spend. So based on the information that they give you each month, we provide them the money that they spend on expenses and payroll and other ancillary items. So it is everything, but we are spending the money as we go. So we may at one particular day of the year have $50 million, because that's half of our tax revenue. I'm assuming that's where you got that money from. But that is absolutely not the norm, even at that time.
That's not your average balance. I see.
No.
All right, I remember, I don't remember the exact amounts, but I remember smiling so much looking at the finance revenue back when we were rolling in the dough. So I'm hoping
that was like
that-
4 or 5 years ago, if not.
Yeah, it was a while ago.
And your consumer interest rates were higher.
Yeah, just a couple of
Yeah.
points. So, which I'm gonna lose now. Which is, of course, the offset is one, the financial director is restricted by the state. We can't get terribly creative in where the money goes.
No derivatives.
And the other is.
No wind farms or?
The offset,
something like
and then of course the offset is whenever we refinance a bond or we borrow at these rates, we get the money back another way. So there's a bit of an offset there. So if we make more money on cash balances, we're going to be paying more money on debt service anyway. So there's your trade-off.
Exactly. And Mr. Chairman, if you wouldn't
Yes.
mind,
Yeah, go ahead.
when I had the pleasure of serving with Bob's dad many years ago, we had some discussions around this very table about how we should more honestly estimate our interest income. And the numbers in those days that we were talking about was we used to estimate 600,000, but we were getting 8. But that's because the interest rates were right. So
It'll be a few years before that
Yeah.
will come back around again, no doubt. It's not on revenue. Just one question I have is on police. I know the last 2 years have been higher, and it's about half of what it's been. But is that an anomaly? Are we
Well,
behind it?
No,
Is
so
it-
this is special duty work. So if you remember the last couple of years, we had large water main projects going through the center of town. We had a number of we had Eversource out all over town. Anytime those type of companies come into town, they require police coverage for traffic, and that's where this funding comes in. So this year, when I drive into town, I'm not meeting all of those construction workers, and that's why this is lower than you've seen the last couple of years.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't, I know that there's still development, there's still construction going around, but not nearly the amount of the last couple of years. That makes a lot of sense.
Correct, and possibly not in places that require a larger number of police coverage. When it was through the center of town and they were putting in the water, that required quite a bit of police coverage, and that equated to the increase in revenue. And of course, when we budget our revenue, we do, typically a 3-year look back. And if we have a couple large years that goes up, and then, this lower year will bring that average down a little bit. But it's really dependent on what's being done within the town.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, one other thing on revenue before we leave it. Youth and Family Services are already at 101.3%.
Yeah.
They're trending towards 160%. And I think you've heard, and thank you very much for being gracious over the past several months or more than that, almost 2 years, where we've invested more in youth and family services in terms of personnel for our children. This is the manifestation of what Lynn Landry has been saying. They're currently at 100 and about 100, 105, 110 kids, when normally they're in the 50 to 55 range. And this is all mental health related to COVID. So this is not a number I'm very happy to report on, because that means we got a lot of kids in this community who are hurting. So,
But it's,
And the expenses are higher
and
as
the
well.
expenses are higher.
And along the same lines, that's not, it peaked and it's on its way down.
No,
It's kind of plateaued or
Yep.
continuing to escalate.
yeah, it's continued to escalate over the last couple of years. Anything else on revenue? Okay. Expenses.
Expenses, currently at 68.8% compared to 66.6 last year and 67% the year before. Most of our departments, as you go down, you see that they are somewhere in the 60 to 70 percent, where I would expect to see most of them at this point. We do have continue to show the overage in capital of about $66,000, with $434,000 worth of encumbrances outstanding. And the fact that we know some of those expenditures will be covered by reserve money that we have in fund balance. So I'm not worried about that number. The other one that's over is debt retirement interest at approximately 13,000. That was just a miscalculation of what the potential expense would be for the bonding this current year. I do put in our debt, as you remember from the presentation, a number that we expect might come into fruition 18 months or more later. So that number was just a little bit low. So we have money again in fund balance committed to debt reserve. So there's plenty of money there to cover this overage. Other than that, I will take questions from the board.
Good.
Someone came around the table.
Maybe just the legal line.
Great job, Mary Jane. Go, sorry, Jonathan, go
Mentioned
ahead.
already.
I'm sorry, Jonathan, I didn't hear your question.
Maybe just I'll ask a little bit about legal. It looked like it was running low, and that seems good, but see if that's the trend or just timing.
Well, a couple things. Matt may prefer to discuss it, but we are still reviewing that whole department on how we pay for the services of the contracted legal advisor, Peter Barrett. If you remember, just a couple of years ago, we did have full-time staffing. So we do have shown reductions in the legal line because of that change in how we're managing that. And we do, I don't have the detail in front of me, but I know that we have some money in the budget for items that we've yet to deal with this year. So, we'll see where this line item comes at the end of the year.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, I would agree with Mary Jane. The change in the way we structured the legal department has resulted in some savings over the years. No offense to the attorneys in the room, but sometimes their billing seems to fall behind because they're more interested in doing legal work than they are making sure that their accountants make sure that they build. So again, it's trailing. I don't think that 37% number is going to hold up through the balance of the year. I wouldn't expect it to, but I'm sure that it's going to be under budget. So, and we've also, knock on wood, have not had significant disputes or cases that we've had to take care of. So
We did.
Yeah, but keep in mind that we just went through a very arduous negotiation with the fire department, and we probably do not have the majority of those bills in yet.
Kenny?
We did increase, but for next budget, though, we did increase that legal fee, did we not?
We only
Because of-
increased it about 5% on that because the reality is the cases that will come about as a result of the appeals and reval.
Yeah.
Most of that, the hearings will be in February and then, and Jeff, you know this better. But the real work starts probably in the summer or the following fall, when you actually go through the process, people decide to engage an attorney and then make the cases, so.
Yeah,
it's-
the appeals will be brought in February, the decision of next year. The decisions will be made by the Board of Assessment Appeals in March. Then the homeowners or the property owners have until 2 months following the decision, so that the actions won't start at the latest until the end or mid to the end of May, depending on how many appeals we're
Appeals are
taking. And so the town won't be really engaging council on any measurable amount until the next fiscal year.
Right.
So
That's when-
be
and that's when all the
prepared
invoices
be
will-
prepared for a bigger legal budget
Next year.
this time next year when we're talking. So. And we actually, Mary Jane has been terrific in terms of mapping out these 5-year reval cycles to show how much our legal budgets increase in, the immediate year that reval happens versus the subsequent years, and it tails out. So.
Okay.
And Pete Barrett's doing a pretty good job of managing the expenses too. I have to give him some credit there.
Okay.
Don't tell him, but.
Make sure he's not watching. Anything else on expenses? Otherwise, we'll move on to warrants. Anything on any warrants?
Can I ask you a question on the special warrants? I saw a couple of lines for United Way shelter diversion. Is that one of our charities, or what does that one go towards?
Mary Jane, I'll take that. That is a pass-through from the Department of Housing as well as the state of Connecticut. We have partnered with the United Way of Greater New Haven. They are the coordinated access network for housing and homelessness. That program is, the funds come from a grant that the town of Guilford applied for and received from, it's known as a CDBG, Community Development Block Grant. Small Cities Grant, it's a federal program. We received $350,000, and I see Megan Scanlon nodding her head. There are additional resources at her former employer, Youth and Family Services, which go to help alleviate or to, it's a housing diversion program, which is basically to give families and individuals the tools to prevent homelessness. And again, it's at no cost to the town of Guilford. And in fact, we receive about $5,000 a year, $5,000 off the top of that grant for our administrative time and costs associated with my office, in particular Karen Korsha, who is certified as an agent with the Department of Housing at the state of Connecticut. Megan, is there anything you want to add about that grant?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, the whole point, the whole idea is that she's able to provide services. So there's a housing navigator just for the shoreline, which is unique to this program because a lot of times they're just based in the cities. So they brought one out for the shoreline, and the whole goal is that she can divert people from either losing their apartments or their homes. So they have resources in order to do that so that they stay out of shelter and they stay housed. And that's the goal.
So if you're like falling short on your mortgage, maybe you got health bills, some problems, they'll come through and
Yep.
make a couple
Yeah.
payments.
So they have like rental
Okay.
assistance programs that they can access through the entire CAN network. So it depends on like what your situation is, but yeah, they can access all of the resources statewide through the CAN to help individuals ideally stay at the same place that they are living right now. But if not, they can also get them on the list for like rapid rehousing, temporary permanent housing. So that the ultimate goal is that they don't end up in shelter.
Yeah, probably better than having the displacement and then get stuck in a shelter.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a state program. That's why some of those checks go out.
It's actually
Federal money that comes to the state and then passes through to the towns.
Okay. All right,
And
I just, I was curious about that one. It's a big number.
Yeah, and I'll just add, we have 2 consecutive $350,000 grants
True.
for that project, not just one. We're in our second year.
That was my only one for special warrants.
Anything else on warrants? Medical? Mary Jane, anything you want to add to that?
Just bringing it up.
Yeah,
You'll see, go ahead.
Less, well, I was gonna say it's a little bit less than budgeted. The only thing I was getting a little bit, I get a little bit confused about is the invoicing of that. So March is going to be reflective of February, correct? And the invoicing in February, which means that there could
No.
be, because of vacations or anything like that, that people had electives done in February, or is February literally February? I'm always a
February
little bit off in the timing.
February is pretty much February. So when you go to
It
your
is.
doctor and they have an invoice, they're sending that in, right away. So it's accounted for somewhat quickly. So
Okay.
it doesn't have as much delay as we would see in other areas. But I know the question came up at the selectmen's meeting this morning about the fees. And again, I'll just note that some of the fees are quarterly and some are annual and some are monthly. So the fees do fluctuate from month to month, although in our projection, we just do a flat monthly 1/12, but it does fluctuate on the fee schedule for different types of services.
You may have mentioned this already, but will we have a similar ISL premium next year?
I think it's higher, right, Linda? I don't have those numbers in front of me. It's higher than where we are today.
Okay.
Yeah, we raised it.
Okay. Anything else on medical? Anything else at all for town government? Okay. I'll entertain a motion to approve the report of expenditures of the town government for February 2022 in the amount of $2,631,539.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstentions, recusals. Excellent. Okay, so I guess, Mary Jane, you're not necessarily coming off the stage yet, but
Not off the hook yet. Nope.
not off the hook yet, but item number 7, discuss and take possible action on transfer from reserve for personnel to salary accounts as outlined by the finance director due to the settlement of contracts. We have a memo in front of us dated March 11th. From our finance director that went to both the members of the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance regarding fiscal year 22 salary budget transfers. Do you want to summarize this, Mary Jane, for us, or?
Yes, I'd like to do that. So as I just mentioned in an earlier discussion, we recently finalized our fire department budget, contract, which affects the current year and then will affect the next year, obviously, as well. So this transfer represents all of that, plus a couple other the smaller unions that we have, and in addition, a couple of just personal contracts that we have with some department heads. So they're outlined here. What I really wanted to note is the transfer out of reserve for personnel will indeed overdraw that line. However, we do have close to $200,000 in a committed reserve for personnel that we will transfer at the end of the year if this department needs additional funding.
Okay. And this, I'm trying to figure, it's not 2/3, well, maybe 2/3, about 2/3 of it is for the fire negotiations and contracts.
Yes, and not surprising.
Right.
The majority of it is the
Last
fire
contract.
department.
Yeah, we've known for a while.
There is just one interesting part of that. We've had these discussions in every budget season. the replacement salaries represent over 30% of
Of that.
the regular salary.
Close.
So at some point, we've got to do some kind of study that says, can we hire more and be more effective?
I've asked that question. Of course, they don't see a way to do it, but.
Right. We'll ask it again. We're going to ask it again.
Asking,
How about,
get a different
yeah,
answer.
definition of insanity?
The more people you have, the more people you need to be replaced. Probably
Good.
would increase your reserve.
I tried to relay some comments in your last meeting with Mike, and he couldn't get to all of them, but it occurred to me that maybe we could even hire a guy for every shift and still, that would
That's
still be less.
That's
Than
exactly,
where we're
that's
at.
exactly the point.
Yeah.
But the last time we've asked that, they've said no, that the studies they've done indicate that it is what you pay in additional benefits is cost prohibitive, but it's probably time to take a hard look at that. And I think it's probably
Agreed.
best, it's probably best through the commission. Would that be something you want me to take up?
It
Yeah.
sounds like,
Yeah.
Better
absolutely.
done than us, yeah.
Always good to
That's
reevaluate.
right. That's right.
Okay.
Mary Jean, when is the contract through?
It was a
that's a
4-year
good question.
contract.
Three-year contract. So it was effective for
Four.
2022, so 22, 23, and 24.
Anything else regarding this particular item of the transfer? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Oh, I didn't.
Well, we have it in front of us.
Well, but I like to read.
Okay,
Unless,
you go right
I
ahead.
actually do it for
public.
Tracy's benefit. That's
Yeah.
pretty much it. So make sure she gets it.
And the folks in the.
And the folks,
And the
yeah, so
folks
they
at
just,
home.
repeat it again.
on.
So, but I appreciate the fact that you were jumping on the approval.
Well,
So.
you know,
So I will entertain a motion to approve the transfer of $80,269 from reserve for personnel to the salary accounts as outlined by the finance director in her March 11th, 2022 memo to the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance. This is way too long. I shouldn't have typed it all in, but due to the settlement of contracts. Go ahead.
so moved.
Second.
Any further comment? I didn't think so. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions. Okay, we're good with that one. Item number 8, consider and take possible action on resolutions for bonding items for consideration at the April 12th, 2022 referendum. The bond resolutions have been posted. Really, we've discussed these at the last 3 meetings. Regular meeting, we discussed this was coming. And then we summarized in the last couple with the budget hearing and the budget workshop. And we sent it to bond counsel to craft these. So really, it's just a matter of, reading the motion to recommend. And does anybody have, I won't obviously put a motion with all of this in here, but does anybody have any questions, comments regarding the 2 resolutions in front of us before I just go ahead and put the motion forward to send to the voters?
I had a generalized question, Bob.
I was gonna say, I think we're all very familiar with it, but if there's anything you think people at home should.
Well, my question.
Yeah, this is the time to do it. Go ahead.
My question is on the town's bond for the land acquisition for 10 million. They break it down into class A, B, and C land. How is that decided, I guess?
That is essentially the way we did it the first time through, because largely what we're doing is open space acquisition. If we need to purchase, a major piece of property for like a school or something like that, that would fall probably outside of this. But predominantly, this vehicle was designed for open space preservation in the town of Connecticut. And
Yeah,
That's why,
I just
that's
meant,
why the way.
Does land acquisition make a recommendation on the breakout? Like what
Yes.
part should be class A, what
Yes.
part should be class B? That was my question.
Yes, that is the recommendation of the Land Acquisition Committee. It is consistent with the first bond authorization,
Yeah.
which is what, 22
20-some
years,
years, yeah.
22 years old. Again, we're not significantly in the business of acquiring open space for municipal uses, but that's why we've identified some in the event that we need some.
Yeah, so Veronica, to answer your question, when they come to the selectmen for a recommendation, they would specifically state class A, B, or C.
So is this money going to fund the land acquisition fund?
No, Jonathan, this is
No.
an authorization to draw down or issue bonds in the event that we identify or negotiate to purchase property. But yes, it is supplementary to the land acquisition fund, which has what, about $600,000 in it, or $600,000 or $700,000 in it at this point. This was a program that was put in, as I just mentioned, put in place 22 years ago, which empowers the Land Acquisition Committee to actually negotiate in good faith on a property because they have the good faith and credit of the bond authorization by
It's
the
like a
community
pre-approval
to go out
mortgage,
and
right?
get the money to do so.
If I
But at
could
this
follow up
time, there's no
So-
specific property identified.
No,
Oh, no, we have,
But what,
If
but
all
what
goes
this,
approved.
what this bonding resolution, and assuming it gets approved or referendum, it gives the town flexibility to move quickly if something comes on the market that we haven't identified, but when we're made aware, when the town is made aware of it, if it seems to make sense, the town's got a way to draw on this bonding initiative to get the funds quickly, because a lot of times you may get an offer that's got a limited window that the town can act within, and you want to be able to have the funds available to it without having to go out to referendum for it.
right,
And
John-
it may, in a way,
So
and it may be
Jonathan,
for more than $600,000.
So
Right,
the
so-
last time we bought a pretty major open space piece, I think was many years ago. They refer to it sometimes as the Goss property.
East River.
that was East River Preserve, and that was a separate issue. That did not come through the land acquisition fund based on the size and scale of it. And just if I could, Jonathan, you mentioned about properties identified. The Land Acquisition Committee has a targeted list of properties that is extensive. It's probably in the $30 to $40 million range if you use a certain multiple for open space acreage. And it's a substantial number of properties, many of which may never come to the point where we can negotiate for them. But there are targeted, as you can well imagine, that is a confidential list that is because it is subject to negotiation at any point. So we can't actually publish that.
But they've done their homework.
Yeah.
In case something becomes available. And
Now
just-
this,
Just one thing I want to point out about this is something Guilford's never really done. Some towns will buy up land to use as leverage to offer for commercial purposes, or leverage. And we've not gone there. This is all pretty much preservation, open space, very low impact, municipal, none of it's commercial.
Right. Well, we need to do some zoning code changes to make that happen.
This is like a pre-approval for a mortgage.
You're right.
now, as these opportunities come up, though, the residents may want to know the details, and then they may not want to support the purchase of the property,
Very good
Or-
question,
or
Jonathan.
may want to support it, very gravely want to support it, but
Right.
no details.
Jonathan, there are several checks and balances to this program. The first of which is the land acquisition has to come to the Board of Selectmen to ask to negotiate to purchase the property. And then the Board of Selectmen sets some parameters. Once that happens, we have to go to town meeting, but the Board of Finance also is part of that chain. They have to approve going to town meeting to purchase the property. So there is a process with several checks and balances, and you are actually, as a member of the Board of Finance, part of that process.
Now, if we have the authorization, obviously we won't borrow the money unless it's needed to purchase a property. But will that affect any of our financial ratios that sort of lead to our rating?
It fits into the rating because there is a category in the evaluation that is authorized but not yet utilized or expended. And that additional 10 million is probably not going to move the dial at all.
I actually spoke to our financial advisors extensively on the request of the Land Acquisition Commission. And we could triple or higher that number, and it still would not affect our bond rating.
Good discussion. There's, again, focused on the land acquisition bond, anything on the schools. Again, neither one of these is a surprise to us, and it's all listed in here. I know, just, I guess, as a reminder to the public, Bob, to make your point, I mean, it's good just, I guess, to remind, we don't have to talk about the land bond, but for the school bond, it is for renovations and improvements to various town schools, including the kitchen renovation at Baldwin Middle School, library renovations at Cox Elementary School, renovations to 595 New England Road to convert it into central office space for the Board of Education, replacement of the playground at Guilford Lakes Elementary School, the replacement of tennis courts at Guilford High School, and then future project design costs for various town schools. The resolution that I'll read the motion, will not be that long, but it'll have some of that in there. But there's a little additional detail on the various town schools, so I want to make sure I read that.
Is that a 2-year request or just a 1-year bonding request?
1 year.
Mr. Chairman, if I may
It could be
just,
spread out. I mean, it doesn't have to be in the year, but this is a 1-year request. I'm sorry, Dr. Bellis, Tracy.
no, I just want to make one clarification, which I know you know, but just for anyone viewing, it is a replacement of the district-wide playground at Guilford Lakes. The playground that is specific to the students just of Guilford Lakes is a project that I believe the PTO is taking on, as have the PTOs at our other elementary schools.
Good clarification. Thank you.
Also, the replacement of the tennis courts is not, relining and repaving. It's the,
This is a complete substrate that has not been touched in 25 years.
Since you were playing on those courts in high school?
Maybe I still play on them. No, it doesn't happen. Way to throw me under the bus.
But that raises a good point, because
It does.
although it's the Guilford High School tennis courts,
The
members of
public's
the
use of
public
that
use it
is,
extensively.
yes.
but it also raises another question, which I've had over the course of many years, is about how the wording is going to be on the ballot so that the taxpayer understands, like it just says replacement of the tennis courts. So, are they thinking it's just going to be,
Right.
resurfacing and
Relining.
and relining? I mean, and that
It's a bigger project than that.
it's like the year they called snow plows some strange word, and it failed at referendum because nobody knew what they were referring to.
Does the referendum list the items separately with separate cost, or is it just the total?
I'm looking up the exact wording right now because the Board of Selectmen approved that this morning.
What you see is what would be read.
So
What
it's
you'd
one,
read.
it's one lump
What you
sum.
see is what you, yes.
Okay.
I
So
think
they-
that's it. I just wanted to double check.
And it's a substantial number. So,
Right.
and I brought this comment up, as you remember during the workshop, when we were talking about the bonding, that this isn't just this restriping and a resurfacing. It's going all the way down, going 8, I'm not a tennis court designer,
Yeah,
but 8
but
inches,
it's a big deal.
12 inches down.
Right.
And replacing
does
all
say-
the substrate, stone, everything.
But there,
Go
It
ahead.
does say the replacement of,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is not
Not
a
renovation,
fix.
not renovation.
To me, replacement means you take away everything that's there and you put something new. So hopefully people will understand that.
they're not gonna see the cost of that.
No.
They're seeing
That's not
3.8 million for
For all of
renovating
them.
office space and a kitchen and all that, so they're not
Right.
gonna.
Yeah,
Well, it goes for the district playground also. I
Right,
mean, the
yeah.
district playground is a
It could
big
be
number.
20
If you-
grand and.
Right, if you're
you know,
thinking playground, you think, oh, it's not that much, but it is because it's the district playground. It's the entire town. So,
Well, certainly that's a question that the Board of Education or even me could answer at the annual meeting, at the budget meeting. If anybody has a specific question, we do have all the individual cost estimates.
And as some of you may recall from having been on the board for a couple of years, the language is purposely vague relative to the use of these funds. They can be moved if it doesn't cost what we thought it was going to cost for the tennis court. We still have the capacity to use that for anything else that falls into the bucket of what they're talking
If
about.
some of the playground equipment is really used for
Yes.
sides or
Yep.
whatever, yeah.
yeah.
And this is also the fool's errand of municipal financing. We can't put an RFP together and go out to bid until we have an authorization to spend it.
Right.
So, these are estimates at this point. So.
Pretty better estimates than what's in the past, though.
Yeah, that's true.
Because of that
Since
design
we went to design, that's right.
Yeah.
Any on-call engineers?
Yeah.
Geez, whose idea was that?
I have no idea. I'll give it to you.
No, it wasn't me. It was you.
All right, so anything further on the bonding items, and I'll read the motions. Just before I read them, because it's still part of the budget and it's gonna go to referendum, I'm gonna do roll call. So I'm gonna just do it in alphabetical order. So just so everybody's captured, okay? And I also knew that we're gonna have a couple people on screen, so I want to make sure that we're all captured. So the first one, motion to recommend to the voters a resolution to appropriate a bond authorization of $3,885,391 for renovations and improvements to various town schools, the replacement of the playground at Guilford Lakes Elementary School, the replacement of the tennis courts at Guilford High School, and future project design costs for various town schools.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. And just indicate favor aye, opposed nay, or abstain. Ailes, aye. Beatty,
Aye.
Earls,
Aye.
Hartman,
Aye.
Scanlon,
Aye.
Trotta,
Nay.
Wallace.
Aye.
Okay. On to item number 2, motion to recommend to the voters a resolution to appropriate a bond authorization of $10 million for acquisition of Class A, B, and C lands as defined in the town's plan for open space and municipal land needs.
So moved.
Second.
I'll do the roll call. In favor, Ailes, aye. Beatty,
Aye.
Earls,
Aye.
Hartman,
Aye.
Scanlon,
Aye.
Trotta,
Nay.
Walls.
Aye.
And we're on the home stretch, everyone. Thank you. Going on to item number 9. Discuss and take possible action on the appointment of an auditor for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2022. What is that time of year? That we need to, even though we have an agreement, we still have to appoint the auditor every year. I believe we're right in the middle of that, Mary Jane. You might want to fill in the gaps here, but we're right in the middle of that RFP that we sent out, and we selected Clifton Larson Allen as our auditor.
Correct.
two?
So, right. So keep in mind, I've only worked for the town of Guilford for 5 years, and twice we have already gone out for an RFP for these services. So I commend the Board of Finance for doing their due diligence, even when we still had years on the book from a prior one. But yes, we went out the second time in early 2020. So this is the third of a 5-year agreement with Bloom Shapiro, which is now CLA, and they are keeping the agreement that we have with this particular RFP, the pricing.
Does anybody have any further comments on that? Otherwise, I would go ahead and make the recommendation that we keep. Did they go by Bloom Shapiro CLA? Or is it just CLA? Okay.
CLA.
I keep seeing Bloom
Clifton-
Shapiro, but I know
I know.
they're merged. So.
It's Clifton Larson and Associates, but CLA.
Oh, I thought it was Clifton Larson Allen.
Yes, that's what they're.
Oh, Alan, I'm sorry. It is. You're right. I'm so used to
I
having
know
associates.
typically you hear A is associates. I got you. Okay.
It's been a long day for me today.
All right, that's the way I'm gonna read the motion, so I would go ahead and make a motion to, or entertain a motion to appoint Clifton Larson Allen LLC as auditor for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2022.
So
So
moved.
moved.
Okay,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? No, I don't think we need abstentions. Well, abstentions, but not recusals. Okay. Item number 10, committee reports, building permits. Nothing on building permits. We'll move on to item 11, old business. I had 3 items under old business. 2 of them have to do with the budget. Just a reminder, I think not necessarily for us, but for the viewing public. Town meeting regarding the budget is at the community center in person on Tuesday, April 5th at 7:30 p.m.
Correct.
And from there, it will be sent, hopefully, as is typical, it will be sent to town budget referendum on Tuesday, April 12th. And that will be from 6 a.m., 8 p.m. All polling places will be open. And so that's the PSA for the budget for April 5th and April 12th. And then I did want to bring up this old business. We're approaching spring and the facilities tour.
Excuse me.
And
Yesterday was the start.
yes, well, all right, you're right. Well, I haven't been outside much.
Spring has sprung. Spring has sprung.
Good point. So facilities tour. It could be April. I think April still is a little bit, I mean, maybe we could go, how does everybody feel about a facilities tour? Maybe in May as opposed to April, get a little bit more daylight, probably a little more warmth.
Through April 18th, I'm free.
Yeah, April. So
Yeah, he's straight out through April. 18th.
Yeah, oh, that's right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yes, yeah.
I'm grumpier.
Yeah, yeah, no, we don't want grumpy Bob.
Than usual.
No, May works. And if you don't mind me saying, I caught, there was an eye-catching number in one of the warrants, a bill for a surveying on Hubbard. And I'd like to put in the request now that we swing by that
Yes, I think.
address.
Take a look at it. Yeah, that's the affordable housing thing.
When
And actually, just to follow up, that survey will be paid for by the developer. And they have to reimburse us. That's an 830G affordable housing application in front of us. So if they satisfy septic, and there's some question as to whether or not they actually have to satisfy inland wetlands, but that's we don't want to get to that fight quite yet. But I'd take a ride by that facility too.
So logistically, if we set it for, or look to set it for May, we need to just make sure we get a time and then how we're going to, I know there was some talk about, do we grab a van and
We'll give
around in
one of the
van
park
or-
and rec buses, and
then just
Steve
have
Nidorf will
Jen
be your host.
Just have a list of the facilities and
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
drive around to locations so we have a better understanding.
Maybe
Yeah.
between now and our April meeting, we could get a list of
The property.
facilities that you think we. would
Oh,
most-
look at
we'd
it.
Well,
most-
Bob's done this. You probably should do
Oh, yeah.
them all, right?
And yeah, and I would take guidance from standing buildings for them to see for them
To
to
come along.
recommend what they would like us to see. But basically, it's public works, some
Right.
public buildings, storage facilities.
Facilities, right.
Storage is a big deal. Even the basement of town hall, if you haven't been to every room, dispatch, all these things. It's the things where people feel need cramped or things that gotta happen.
Oh, we got a tour of the police department and the fire department. That's where all the excitement is.
Very familiar with their police and they welcome you back. That's and then maybe the new property up south of Route 80.
Right. Yeah, actually, Janice is up there today with the engineering team that we've engaged for the feasibility study up there. So got to wear your boots when you go up there.
To go to Jeff's point, I think that having that list might also allow us that if we have that list, we can, maybe we can't, obviously can't get into buildings, but maybe we can at least get some.
You can get into any building. We have the keys.
Well, depending, obviously depending on if we're driving around town, we're like, oh, I'm gonna stop by here just to get a head start and take a look at a few of the facilities, at least the sites. It gives us the opportunity to do that. We don't have to, but at least we have the list and we could be maybe a little bit proactive before that day.
That's fine. We'll get the list.
All right.
Yep.
And this would be the day of our regular meeting, so we would meet before the regular meet. Might as well just make a day out of it
That's fine.
and make it a town day, town facilities board.
What day of May is our meeting?
Great question.
Well,
16th.
16th.
Sugar?
Spoke too soon?
Anniversary?
I'll either be on a little island in the Channel Islands or in Spain. I won't
Oh,
be
he
in
had
this,
a wedding, that's
in
right.
this country. The 10th.
There are-
Put it off. When are you here?
Yeah, well.
I mean, we put it off this long. What's another?
Well, it's a week or whatever.
Yeah, we're gone from the 10th to the 19th, but it's the only time I'm getting to leave Guilford in the whole year, so.
Play that well.
Busting loose.
Boston, yeah, Madison's like pack a lunch.
So we could do the 23rd or.
Yeah.
Yeah.
month.
Yeah, pick a date and we'll make sure it works.
Yeah.
We'll make sure it works.
Yeah,
Great.
we could do the week after the 23rd. That's okay. It doesn't have to fall in there. May 23rd,
That works for me.
Jonathan, Megan, look okay right now?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Great.
Thanks.
All right.
Going back to the referendum, did one of the polling districts change?
Not for the referendum.
Okay.
Not for the referendum. Actually,
That's
this
the
morning at the
future.
Board of Selectmen meeting, we approved the redistricting, which has been precipitated by the change in the 98th and whatever Vin Candela's district is. I can't remember that number. So
86th.
everybody that was in District 4 up at Melissa Jones, who lives below Route 80, is now going to District 2. So that's the new dividing line because Vinny picked up some more territory elsewhere. They just carve it up. So it's not effective until the primary elections at the earliest.
Okay, so the public doesn't need to worry about that.
Public doesn't need to worry about it, but the public will need to worry about it. In the unfortunate case that we have a second referendum, that's when it will apply because it has to go into effect prior to the state conventions. Because the delegates to the state conventions have to be from the appropriate districts.
So it's past the budget. So
Clear.
we don't
Pass the
worry about
budget and then we can worry about the primary. So
it.
Yeah,
Thank you for
exactly.
clarification.
But we will be sending out postcards to everyone who's affected. We will be utilizing various social media outlets. We'll be issuing press releases to direct people to the resources they can get to find out if theirs have changed. But the baseline is, it's not going to, we're going to send you a postcard or a letter.
If you don't get notified.
If you don't get notified, go to the same place. And the other messages, even if you show up at the wrong place, they'll tell you, and you just got to drive somewhere else.
Anything else under old business?
Or you can vote absentee. That doesn't matter.
Item 12, new business. Under new business. Item 13, public forum. Anybody wishing to address the board in public forum? Seeing none. I believe that would be a wrap.
We adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
See you
Good evening, all.
In person, most of us anyway. See you next time.
Great. Nice to be